The second I pulled that hidden phone out of my couch, my wife froze like I had just caught her mid-crime, and in that tiny, silent pause before she said a single word, I felt something inside me collapse so completely that I already knew whatever came next was going to ruin my life. 1 second I was on my knees cleaning up apple juice our daughter had spilled, annoyed about the sticky mess soaking into the cushions, and the next I was holding a phone I had never seen in 8 years of marriage, its black screen lighting up against my hand like it had been waiting for me to find it. Emily was in the kitchen, rinsing a cup, humming like nothing in the world had changed, and I remember staring at her with this strange split in my mind, because half of me was still in that normal, boring moment of family life, and the other half was already screaming that something was deeply, horribly wrong. The lock screen lit up again, and the message was still there, bright and impossible to ignore. "You miss me already?" Followed by a heart, and I swear my fingers went numb around the phone like it didn't belong to me anymore. I walked into the kitchen slowly, holding it out just enough for her to see, and said, as calm as I could force myself to sound, "Whose phone is this?" And I watched her face change in a way I had never seen before, because for a split second there was real fear there, raw and unfiltered, before it disappeared so fast it almost made me doubt I had seen it at all. Then she frowned, like I was the problem, like I had just done something wrong, and said, "Why are you digging through the couch like some kind of investigator?" And that answer hit me harder than any confession could have. "I was cleaning up our kids' mess, Emily." "Whose phone is it?" I said, and she dried her hands slowly, deliberately, like she was buying time, then shrugged and said, "It's a work backup. You're being weird." And the way she said it, smooth and controlled, made something cold settle in my chest, because my wife has always been a terrible liar about small things, the kind who laughs or over-explains, but this sounded practiced. I asked her to unlock it, and she let out this quiet, almost amused laugh I had never heard before and said, "No, because I'm not rewarding this jealous, paranoid behavior. You're embarrassing yourself right now." And I felt heat rush into my face so fast it made my vision blur. "Paranoid?" I said. "You have a hidden phone stuffed inside our couch." And she stepped closer, lowering her voice like I was the one losing control, like I was the problem she had to manage, and said, "You've been stressed for months, and now you're creating drama over nothing. Do you hear yourself?" For a second, I actually did question myself, and I hate that I did, because when someone you love speaks with that much confidence, you start checking your own reality before you question theirs. But then the phone buzzed in my hand, sharp and sudden, and she lunged for it without thinking. I pulled it back instinctively, and the screen lit up again. "Same hotel Friday? I need you." Everything inside me went quiet. I looked at her and said, "Tell me who he is." And she didn't answer right away, which somehow felt worse than any lie she could have told, because silence can confess things words still try to hide. Then she met my eyes, completely calm, almost irritated, and said, "If you're going to accuse me of something, you better be ready for the truth." And right then a new message popped up on the screen. Tyler, my best friend's name. And that was the moment I realized this wasn't just betrayal. This was something much worse. Tyler's name sat there on that screen like a weapon, and for a second, I honestly thought I was misreading it, like my brain was trying to protect me from something too ugly to process all at once. Emily saw me looking, saw exactly what I saw, and instead of denying it, she went pale and then angry, like I had crossed some line by noticing the truth. I said his name out loud because I needed to hear how impossible it sounded in my own voice. "Tyler?" My throat tightened around it. "My Tyler?" she snapped. "Do not stand there and act innocent with me." And that hit me so hard I almost dropped the phone. Innocent. That was the word she chose. Not sorry, not calm down, not let me explain. Innocent. I kept staring at her while 100 memories started tearing through my head at once. Tyler at our wedding raising a glass to us, Tyler holding my son the day we brought him home, Tyler sitting in this exact house 2 weeks earlier laughing with me over a game while Emily moved around the kitchen acting like my life was not quietly being gutted behind my back. I asked her, "How long?" And she said, "You do not get to interrogate me like I'm some criminal." Which was when I realized she was not scared I had found out. She was furious that she had lost control of the story. I called Tyler right there with my hands shaking so hard I almost hit the wrong name, and Emily moved fast, trying to grab the phone, telling me I was making a mistake, telling me I was unstable, telling me I was about to ruin multiple lives because I loved drama more than truth. That sentence burned straight through me. I put my arm out to keep her back, and when Tyler answered, all I said was, "Tell me why your name is on my wife's hidden phone." There was this dead silence on the line, just breathing, and then he hung up. No confusion, no "what are you talking about," no laugh, nothing. He just hung up. Emily looked at me like I had detonated something, and then the phone in my hand started ringing almost immediately. "Tyler." I answered, and he was whispering, like he was either with someone or hiding from someone. And he said, "Bro, this is not what you think." I actually laughed when he said it, because every man who gets caught says the exact same thing, like betrayal comes with a script. I said, "Then come say it to my face." And he told me to calm down, told me Emily was upset, told me I needed to handle this carefully because the kids don't need to hear anything ugly. The kids. Hearing him use my children as a shield made something dark rise up in me that I had never felt before. Emily started crying then, but not the kind that comes from heartbreak. These were tactical tears, the kind that arrive the moment somebody needs to become the victim. She said I was scaring her, said I had been distant for months, said I had no idea what she had been carrying alone, and every word was designed to drag me off balance. Then she made it worse. She looked me in the eye and said, "You think Tyler is the problem because that is easier than admitting this marriage has been dead for a long time." I felt my whole body go cold, because that was not an excuse somebody invents in panic. That was a line she had rehearsed, probably more than once, probably for him, maybe even for herself. I asked her if Tyler was the only one, and she froze just long enough to answer the question without opening her mouth. Right then, headlights swept across our front window, and when I turned toward the door, Emily whispered, almost to herself, "He should not be here." Those headlights didn't just light up the room. They exposed something I wasn't ready to see yet, like a stage suddenly flooded with light before the actors can get back into character. I turned slowly toward the door, my chest tight, and Emily moved behind me in a way that felt calculated, like she was trying to control what I would see first. I remember asking, "Who is here?" But it came out quieter than I expected, like part of me already knew I didn't want the answer. She didn't respond right away, just kept shaking her head under her breath, whispering, "This is not happening like this," over and over again, like she was trying to rewrite the moment before it finished unfolding. Then there was a knock. Not hesitant, not confused, but firm, familiar. The kind of knock that doesn't belong to a stranger. I walked to the door before she could stop me, and I could feel her right behind me, close enough that I knew she was ready to grab my arm again if she had to. When I opened it, Tyler was standing there, breathing hard, eyes darting past me into the house like he was walking into a fire he thought he could still control. For a second, we just stared at each other, and I kept waiting for him to look guilty, to look ashamed, to look like a man who had just been caught destroying his best friend's life. But he didn't. He looked tense, yes, but there was something else there too, something that made my stomach drop even further. Confidence. Like he thought he could talk his way out of this. "We need to calm this down," he said, stepping forward like he still belonged here, like this was still his safe place too. I didn't move out of the way, and he stopped just short of me, his voice dropping. "This isn't how you should be finding out." Finding out. That phrase echoed in my head like a gunshot. Not if, not what are you talking about, not denial, just confirmation wrapped in softer words. Behind me, Emily finally spoke, her voice sharp and controlled again. "I told you not to come here," she said to him. But it didn't sound like anger. It sounded like frustration that the timing was wrong. That detail cut deeper than anything else so far, because it meant this wasn't chaos to them. This was a situation that had rules, plans, boundaries I wasn't supposed to cross. I looked between them and said, "So this is real?" And Tyler ran a hand through his hair and said, "It's complicated." I actually felt myself smile at that. Not because anything was funny, but because I realized in that moment just how far gone everything already was. "Complicated," I repeated. "You're standing on my doorstep after texting my wife about hotels, and you think the word is complicated?" Emily stepped forward then, putting herself between us like she was managing two problems instead of betraying one person. "Stop escalating this," she said, her voice firm, almost commanding. "You're going to wake the kids." That snapped something in me. I lowered my voice, but every word felt like it was being dragged out of something broken inside my chest. "You already woke something," I said. "You just didn't expect me to see it." Tyler looked at her then, not at me, like he was waiting for instructions, and that was when the power dynamic finally became clear in a way I couldn't ignore anymore. This wasn't some reckless mistake between two people who lost control. There was structure here, alignment, decisions made long before tonight. And then Tyler said something that made the floor drop out from under me completely. He said, "He doesn't know everything yet, does he?" That sentence didn't just land. It split everything open in a way I wasn't prepared for. Like up until that moment, I had been staring at the surface of something ugly. And suddenly, I was being dragged underneath it. I looked at Tyler, then at Emily, and I felt this strange, hollow calm settle over me. The kind that only shows up when your mind decides panic isn't useful anymore. "What don't I know?" I asked, and my voice didn't even sound like mine. Emily shot Tyler a look, sharp and warning, but it was too late, because now I could see it clearly. The way they communicated without words, the way they adjusted around each other like this wasn't new territory. Tyler exhaled slowly and said, "This is why I didn't want to do this here." And I laughed again, but it came out wrong, like something breaking. "Do what here?" I said. "Stand in my house and tell me how long you've been lying to me, or explain why you're acting like I'm the last person who's supposed to understand what's going on." Emily stepped closer, lowering her voice again like she was trying to bring the temperature down, but it felt like manipulation wrapped in calm. "You're spiraling," she said softly. "You're not thinking clearly." That line almost made me lose it completely, because there is something deeply disorienting about being betrayed and then told your reaction to it is the real problem. I turned to her and said, "Then help me think clearly. Tell me what he meant." She hesitated, just for a second, but that second said everything. Tyler rubbed his face and muttered, "This wasn't supposed to happen like this." And I snapped, "Stop saying that like there was a better version of this. There isn't." Then Emily said something that made my stomach twist in a way I can't fully describe even now. She said, "You've been checked out for a long time, Michael." Hearing my name like that, in that tone, felt deliberate, like she was trying to create distance even in the way she addressed me. "You stopped seeing me," she continued. "And I tried to tell you, I tried to fix this, but you just kept going through the motions like everything was fine." I stared at her, trying to reconcile the woman in front of me with the life I thought we had, and all I could think was how convincing she sounded, how structured her explanation was, like she had built this narrative brick by brick long before tonight. "So this is my fault?" I asked, and she didn't even flinch. "It's not about fault," she said. "It's about reality." Tyler shifted uncomfortably, like even he knew that line crossed into something colder, but he didn't stop her. That was another thing that hit me hard, the realization that he wasn't just part of this. He was complicit in the version of the story she was trying to build right in front of me. I looked at him and said, "You've been in my house. You've looked me in the eye. You've sat with my kids, and you're standing here letting her say this like it explains anything." He opened his mouth, then closed it, then finally said, You don't understand how bad things have been. That's when it clicked. Not fully, but enough to make something inside me turn. This wasn't just about them sneaking around. This was about them rewriting our entire marriage into something broken enough to justify what they had done. I took a step back, trying to create space between all of us, because suddenly the room felt too small, too tight, like the walls were closing in with every word they spoke. "So tell me everything," I said, forcing the words out steady. "No more vague explanations, no more, 'it's complicated.' Tell me what I don't know." Emily looked at Tyler again, and this time there was no hiding it, no subtlety, just a clear, silent agreement passing between them. Then she turned back to me, her expression flattening in a way that felt almost unrecognizable, and said, "If we're doing this, then you need to hear all of it." She paused, just long enough to let the weight of that sink in, and then added, "Because this didn't start with Tyler." That sentence didn't just confuse me. It hollowed me out. Because whatever I thought this was, whatever version of betrayal I had barely begun to process, she had just expanded it into something bigger, older, and a lot more deliberate. I stared at her and said, slowly, carefully, "What do you mean it didn't start with Tyler?" And she didn't answer right away, just folded her arms like she was bracing herself, not against guilt, but against inconvenience. Tyler shifted again beside the door, his eyes flicking between us, and for the first time since he arrived, he looked unsure, like even he wasn't comfortable with where this was going. That terrified me more than anything else so far, because if he thought this was too much, then I had no idea what I was about to hear. Emily exhaled and looked past me for a second, toward the hallway where our kids were sleeping, like she needed to remind herself of something before continuing. Then she said, "You remember when I started staying late at work last year?" And I felt my stomach drop immediately, because of course I remembered. I remembered the dinners that went cold, the texts that said, "running behind," the way she would come home tired but distant, like she had already spent all her emotional energy somewhere else. "That wasn't work," she continued, her voice steady, almost detached. "Not most of the time." I felt my hands curl into fists without even realizing it. "So who?" I asked, but my voice cracked this time, because part of me already understood the pattern that was forming, and I didn't want to hear another name layered on top of the one that was already destroying me. She hesitated again, and this time Tyler actually stepped forward slightly, like he was about to interrupt, but she cut him off with just a look. "It was someone from the gym," she said finally, and the way she said it, so clean, so simple, made it feel even worse, like it had been easy, like it had been normal for her to build a whole separate life piece by piece, while I stayed exactly where she left me. I let out a breath that didn't feel like it belonged to me. "So Tyler was just, what? The next one?" I asked, and she shook her head immediately. "No," she said, and there was something almost defensive in it. Tyler was different. That word echoed in my head in a way that made my skin crawl. Different. Not wrong, not a mistake. Different. I looked at Tyler then, really looked at him, and for the first time I saw something I had missed before. Not just guilt or tension, but familiarity. Like he had been part of something ongoing, something that didn't start with him but that he had stepped into willingly. "You knew," I said to him, and it wasn't even a question anymore. He didn't answer right away, and that silence confirmed everything. Emily stepped in again, quick, controlled. "Don't put this all on him," she said. "This isn't some story where he manipulated me. I made my own choices." That might have sounded like accountability to someone else, but to me it felt like strategy, like she was protecting him in a way she hadn't protected me in a long time, maybe ever. My head was spinning now, trying to connect timelines, memories, moments that suddenly didn't feel the same anymore. "How long?" I asked again, because that question kept coming back no matter how many answers I got. She looked at me, And this time there was no softening, no attempt to cushion it. "Over a year," she said. I actually staggered back a step at that, because a year is not a mistake, it's not confusion, it's not something that happens in a moment of weakness. A year is a second life. A year is hundreds of decisions, thousands of lies, entire conversations that never existed because she chose not to have them with me. The house felt different now, like every object in it had been quietly witnessing something I wasn't allowed to see. I ran a hand over my face and said, "And you were just going to keep going, keep lying, keep bringing him into this?" My voice broke on that last part, and I hated that it did. Hated that they could hear how much this was tearing through me. Emily's expression shifted slightly then, not to guilt, but to something colder, almost resigned. "It wasn't supposed to come out like this," she said again, and I shook my head immediately. "Stop saying that," I snapped. "There is no version of this that doesn't destroy everything." Tyler finally spoke again, quieter now. "We were going to tell you," he said, and I turned to him so fast it almost made me dizzy. "When?" I demanded. "After how many more months? After you decided you were done with me completely?" He didn't answer that, and he didn't need to, because the truth was already sitting there between us, heavy and undeniable. Then Emily said something that didn't just hurt. It changed the shape of everything in a way I wasn't ready for. She looked at me, steady, unapologetic, and said, "You keep acting like this is something that was done to you, but you have no idea what I've been dealing with behind your back." That sentence hit differently, because it wasn't just deflection anymore. It was accusation. I felt my chest tighten again, that same cold dread creeping back in. "What is that supposed to mean?" I asked, quieter now, because suddenly I wasn't just hearing betrayal. I was hearing the beginning of something else, something darker. She held my gaze for a long second, and then she said, "You really don't remember, do you?" That question didn't just catch me off guard. It made me feel like the ground I was standing on had shifted into something unstable, something I couldn't trust anymore. "Remember what?" I asked, and I could hear it in my own voice now. That crack, that uncertainty creeping in where anger had been just seconds ago. Emily didn't answer immediately, and that silence felt different from the others, heavier, like she was deciding how much to reveal rather than whether to lie. Tyler looked at her, then at me, and for the first time since he showed up, he actually looked uncomfortable in a way that felt real, like he had stepped into something he didn't fully understand either. Emily tilted her head slightly, studying me, and there was something unsettling about it, like she was looking at a version of me I wasn't aware of. "The night you told me you didn't love me the same way anymore," she said finally, and I felt my entire body go rigid. "That never happened," I said immediately, too fast, because I knew it hadn't. I would have remembered something like that, something that devastating, something that final. She didn't flinch. "You were drinking," she continued calmly. "You came home late, you barely looked at me, and when I tried to talk to you, you said you felt trapped, that you didn't know who you were anymore, that maybe we got married too young." Every word she spoke felt like it was being placed carefully, like bricks in a wall she had been building for a long time. I shook my head, stepping back again, trying to physically distance myself from what she was saying. "No," I said, quieter now. "No, that's not real." But the problem was, my mind betrayed me in that moment, because I did remember a night like that. Not exactly like she described it, not with those words, but I remembered coming home late after drinks with co-workers. I remembered feeling off, disconnected. I remembered her asking me what was wrong and me brushing her off, saying something careless, something I didn't think would stick. I had forgotten it the next day, buried it under routine, under normal life. But she hadn't. She had kept it, held on to it, let it grow into something bigger than it ever was. "You don't get to rewrite that into permission for this," I said, and now there was desperation in my voice, because I could feel her pulling the narrative away from me piece by piece. One bad night doesn't justify a year of lies. Emily's expression hardened slightly. It wasn't one night, she said. It was the beginning of you checking out. You stopped fighting for us, so I stopped waiting for you to come back. That logic twisted something inside me, because it sounded almost reasonable if you didn't look too closely, if you ignored the scale of what she had done compared to whatever version of me she had built in her head. Tyler finally spoke, hesitant now. She was hurting, man, he said, and I turned to him so slowly it felt deliberate. And your solution was to step in? I asked, my voice low, controlled in a way that felt dangerous even to me. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out at first, and that told me everything I needed to know about how long this had been building, how many conversations they had shared about me, about us, about a version of my life I didn't even know existed. I ran my hands through my hair, pacing now, because standing still felt impossible. So let me get this straight, I said, trying to piece it together, trying to force it into something that made sense. You decided I was gone emotionally, based on something I don't even fully remember, and instead of talking to me, instead of ending things, you built an entire second life behind my back? Emily didn't respond right away, and that hesitation felt like the closest thing to guilt I had seen from her all night. But when she did speak, it erased even that. I tried to talk to you, she said. You just didn't hear me. That was the moment I realized something that made everything worse, not better. In her mind, this wasn't betrayal. This was justified. This was earned. That thought settled into my chest like something cold and permanent. I stopped pacing and looked at her again. Really looked this time, searching for something familiar, something that connected her to the woman I thought I knew. So what now? I asked, because for the first time, I genuinely didn't know what the next moment was supposed to be. You've been doing this for over a year. He's been part of it. There was someone else before him. So what's the plan? You finally tell me and we just… What? Move on. Emily and Tyler exchanged another look, and this one was different. Not tense, not reactive. Decided. And that's when Emily said something that made my stomach drop in a completely new way. We already made a decision about that. That sentence didn't just anger me. It confused me in a way that felt almost worse, because betrayal I could understand, even if it destroyed me. But this felt like they were trying to bend reality into something unrecognizable. Because of me, I repeated, and I could hear it, that edge creeping back into my voice. Sharper now, more focused. Explain that, carefully. Tyler shifted his weight, and for the first time since he got here, he didn't look confident or controlled. He looked like someone stepping onto unstable ground. You came to me, he said slowly, months before anything happened. You remember that, right? I shook my head immediately, but he kept going, like he had already committed to saying it out loud. You told me you thought Emily was pulling away, that you didn't know how to reach her anymore, that you were worried she didn't love you the same way. That stopped me. Not because it sounded impossible, but because it sounded close enough to something I might have said in a moment of weakness, in a conversation I didn't think would matter beyond that moment. I felt my chest tighten again. So what? I said. I talked to my best friend about my marriage. That's what people do. Tyler nodded quickly, like he expected that reaction. I know, he said. I know, but you didn't just say that. You told me you felt like you were losing her, like you didn't know if it was worth fighting for anymore. I ran a hand through my hair again, trying to piece together fragments of memory that suddenly felt unreliable, like I couldn't trust what I remembered, or what I didn't. And that gives you permission? I snapped. That makes this okay? My voice rose again despite everything, because the logic he was laying out felt so twisted it was almost unreal. No, he said quickly. That's not what I'm saying. Emily stepped in then, her voice calm again, controlled, like she was guiding the narrative back into place. What he's saying is that you checked out long before I did, she said. You just didn't notice it. I looked at her, really looked, and I realized something that made everything settle into a kind of terrible clarity. This wasn't about truth anymore. This was about justification. They weren't trying to understand what happened. They had already decided what it meant. I let out a slow breath, forcing myself to stay steady, because losing control now would only give them more ground to stand on. "So let me get this straight," I said, my voice lower now, more deliberate. "I confide in my best friend that my marriage feels off. You take that as a green light to step in. And somewhere along the way, both of you decide I'm already gone, so none of this counts as betrayal." Neither of them interrupted me this time, and that silence told me I wasn't far off. Emily crossed her arms again, not defensive, but firm. "It wasn't that simple," she said. "But yes, that's part of it." I nodded slowly, because at that point, what else was there to do but acknowledge the version of reality they had built together? "And the lawyer?" I asked, bringing it back to something concrete, something undeniable. "The plans, the timing. When exactly was I supposed to find out that my life was being dismantled behind my back?" Emily hesitated for just a second, and then she said, "Soon." That word hit differently than everything else, because it confirmed something I had been trying not to fully accept. This wasn't a mistake that got out of hand. This was a coordinated exit. I looked around the house then, at the walls, the furniture, the quiet hallway where my kids were sleeping, completely unaware that everything they knew was about to change. And I felt it, not just the anger or the heartbreak, but something deeper, something heavier. Loss, yes, but also clarity. I looked back at both of them and said, "You've been planning my replacement while I was still living here." Neither of them corrected me, and somehow, that silence was the loudest answer I got all night.